Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Stephen Interviews You, where I, Stephen Vitt, sit down and have a casual chat with a very special guest. And his name would be, introduce yourself.
I am Larry Lawrence Crane. Some call me Larry, a lot of call me Lawrence. So Lawrence Crane.
Nice to have you on, Larry. This is episode number 5 of Interviews You. And so let's get right to it. Let's start. You have a YouTube channel called Night Watch, and you cover the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, their sports. So getting into that, first of all, what inspired you to make YouTube videos in general?
So I actually have a long background going all the way back to the early 2000s when I was in high school of kind of being involved in artistic expression. I was a rapper under the moniker Luciato. You can find some of my music online. And if you listen to Night Watch or you tune into Night Watch, the introduction song on that show is actually me on the keyboard and with the music and me actually doing the chorus there. So I kind of already had an expertise in Pro Tools and audio recording, and I had some audio equipment, microphones, speakers, things like that. And so a few years ago, I want to say during the pandemic, I'm a pro football fan too. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I'm a Rutgers sports fan. And so during the pandemic, I found myself when I was looking for content related to pro football. I didn't get enough just from, logging on to local radio down in Miami or listening to the local sports here in New Jersey, New York, or even TV. So I found myself starting to go to YouTube, where a lot of people had started their own channels to discuss topics I was interested in and where it was almost an endless stream of content so I could get my fix. And so I'm sitting there, have a little bit of extra time during the pandemic. I have these microphones because I do music recording. I had done podcasts in the past. I had the Blatant Minority. I have Logic and Larry. These are more like current events, political podcasts. I was a poli sci major at Rutgers. So I'm sitting there, I have all these microphones, these speakers, this equipment, and I'm like, I could do a podcast. I already am used to kind of broadcasting. I took a lot of communications courses to go along with the audiological training in school. Let me just fire this thing up and start talking. And I started Fanatic Fury, which was a Dolphins channel. That took off pretty well and did good. This guy, TD Finns Talk, some of the bigger players put me on. So now I'm sitting there about a year or two after that. And I'm a huge Rutgers sports fan. I went to Rutgers for undergraduate. I went to Rutgers for law school, both times at the Newark campus. I spent a lot of time in the New Brunswick campus growing up in Freehold, New Jersey. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, Rutgers as a school doesn't have a ton of podcast or YouTube content. Now, they have a few players that are already, either active journalists or run some of the big sites. But I said, you know what? There's actually a void and an opportunity there with Rutgers. Now I really know what I'm doing from Fanatic Fury, and I have the audiological background. I know a heck of a lot about Rutgers because I had. So first of all, I was a fan, but there was a SB Nation had a Rutgers site called On the Banks, and Aaron Brightman, who's a notable podcaster now with the Scarlet Faithful, he was running On the Banks for a time, and at one point he just put out an open call. Anybody who's interested in writing for On the Banks, send me a writing sample, and see if you could volunteer to write some content. I also had a background being a lawyer and just writing in writing, and I had an interest in journalism. So I sent him a writing sample. He brought me onto On the Bank. So I was all ready for a time writing about Rutgers athletics for On the Banks, actual articles, typing them out. And so when it came time to start the podcast, I felt I had some basis in covering Rutgers, some basis in the community as somebody who people might recognize from writing about the team. I had the background with the audio. So in my apartment in Newark, I fired up the microphone. I came up with Night Watch. I wanted Nightline, but see, there's at the actual college at night after certain sports games, there's already a program on the real radio called Nightline. So I had to come up with Night Watch, and I thought that still worked. Came up with it, fired it up, and started rolling. And I got a lot of support out of the gate. A lot of just everyday listeners were out there. The College Huddle, which is a network of podcasts and content creators, all for college athletics. Every conference is represented. They reached out to me, Zach Guggenheim, shout out to Sean Morosi, who put me on with him. And they kind of got me a little bit more clout, and I was off to the races. So that's kind of the story of how I started it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. So, in your experiences, having the Night Watch channel, how much of a response have you gotten covering Rutgers sports?
So I would say that there's in that space, there's a few heavy hitters who are either actively working for legitimate newspapers or running the sites, and they get the bulk of the listeners, and they have a big head start on me. However, just from being out in the sphere, and by the way, I've collaborated with some of these guys, like Richie O'Leary and these Mike Broadbent, guys who run these big channels. I've collaborated with them, and they were kind enough to bring me on and take me seriously. And as just listener after listener stumbled upon my content, like I'd be at a Rutgers game and somebody would pull me aside. Hey, Larry K, I'm a big fan of Night Watch. Hey, Larry, what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And guys in the stands while I'm walking, out of the stadium, like, Larry, I listen all the time. Just little by little, sporadic attention from listeners. Kind of then somebody posts on a message board, hey, has anybody heard of Larry K? I heard him on Zach's show on the Big Ten Huddle, and I liked what he had to say. You guys should listen to him. And I've kind of got into the podcast space too. So most of my video content is also available on major podcasting platforms. And so just with the organic word of mouth, I've started to get a good amount of listenership, feedback, participation, and legitimacy. And that's really been interesting. It's enough to keep me going and let me know that I'm making an impact. Somebody out there is listening, perhaps not the pinnacle of where I want to go, but enough to be like, wow, I'm in this space and people know me in this space, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. So, talking about Rutgers sports and particularly the football program, um, in general, in the state of New Jersey, where Rutgers, of course, is located, what is the culture like in college football? What is the culture like up there in New Jersey?
So initially, and we got a lot of flack from this when we first joined the Big Ten, there's this perception that New Jersey is not going to be as raucous or as robust a college football culture as, some SEC schools or traditional Big Ten schools. But what I will say is the market can sometimes be tough because New Jersey is such a metropolitan state that's divided between, the Philadelphia metro region, the New York City metro region. Our cities are much smaller, and they kind of come under the umbrellas of Camden, New Jersey, and Atlantic City are so often associated with Philly, and Newark and Patterson and Jersey City so often associated with New York, that there's a lot of pro sports attention with the Yankees, the Devils, the Rangers, the Giants, and um, sometimes it's a little hard for Rutgers to, distinguish itself in that environment. However, football in general in New Jersey, as opposed to New York, football, whether it's the high school level or guys who come up and go to major colleges, even if it's out of state, go to the NFL. And then obviously the Giants have had a ton of success and they moved from New York to New Jersey many years ago. Uh, there's a big, robust football culture in New Jersey. And when Rutgers really got on the map for real, now Rutgers had a traditionally exceptional football history. They were in the first college football game ever against Princeton in the 1800s. They were respectable in the 1970s, had an undefeated season. Paul Robeson, famous actor, and uh, all those other things, was also a famous All-American football player for Rutgers. But they were in more of an Ivy League, Northeastern conference. So they struggled mightily when they got into the Big East back in the day and tried to go major in the 90s. And when Greg Schiano got here in the early 2000s and got some success for Rutgers and branded Rutgers with that block R, that iconic R that you see on everything, and was able to have some on-field success, Rutgers already had a robust alumni support network for the football team because of those, historical moments, even though it wasn't really on the national stage. Schiano was able to galvanize the state, and in the North and the South, the Philly people and the Northern, New York people, and all the alumni, and really get more of a buy-in. And if you come to Rutgers, like a Rutgers game now, I always tell people who are fans of other teams or other Big Ten fans, be my guest at my tailgate. The tailgate scene and the culture around Rutgers football is, I'll put it up against almost any other program. I'm not talking about when you go to Ole Miss or you go to Alabama. I mean, it's not that level, but it's a big level college football atmosphere. I've been to ACC games at Boston College and things. That's nowhere near what Rutgers has. Rutgers is a huge, robust tailgate scene, full bars, grills going. We have a boardwalk with like carnival stuff, a Ferris wheel. It's an event when Rutgers plays. And there's definitely a robust football culture around Rutgers football. Basketball, when they're good, that's one of the toughest places to play too. Had a disappointing season last year. But I would say that Rutgers has a robust, immersive, and kind of a culture that expands all over New Jersey. The challenge is you have a lot of athletics fans, and then you have people that don't care about athletics. You have a huge alumni base, some of whom care about their particular program or school, some of whom don't. And then if you're from New Jersey, you can buy into Rutgers because it's the state university, but some people still have their, private schools that they went to for college and things, and they may not buy in as much. So it's not as robust as some other states where the state university is everything, whether you went there or not. But there is definitely an immersive, serious football culture, and athletics culture at Rutgers University.
Yeah, so you mentioned Greg Schiano, and that was going to be one of the next questions I was going to ask. Being the head football coach for Rutgers, um, what are your thoughts on Greg Schiano? How much of an impact do you think, in general, has he made uh, for the Rutgers program?
I mean, it's absolutely huge. When he came in, he's a Jersey guy. When he came in, we call it 1.0 and 2.0 because in the middle of this, he left to go coach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL, and then he wound up eventually a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, and he made a couple stops. He was able to get the state. He's a good marketer and a good brander, right? He was able to really tap into the Jersey mentality, the Jersey culture, and give a real good relationship with Rutgers University and Rutgers athletics. He was able to transcend, Rutgers athletics was able to transcend into Jersey culture and really combine the two to galvanize people and create an immersive brand, which from there he was able to recruit more people from the robust high school football ranks in New Jersey and get them to buy in. And so he's produced a lot of talent. He's produced memorable moments. He's made Rutgers football, an event. And again, with that branding, the block R. When Schiano left, Rutgers struggled again for several reasons. But when he was debating coming back in 2019 and the university was in negotiations with him, he almost walked away due to certain things like an impasse with the negotiations. And New Jersey loves Schiano so much that the governor, senators, various alumni, stakeholders were writing letters. It was in papers. It was a statewide thing. And as much as some people would deny that New Jersey embraces Rutgers or that the state university Rutgers isn't important to New Jersey, I would say look at that era. The state of New Jersey took it very seriously when Greg Schiano might not come back to Rutgers. He's the guy that understands the bureaucratic issues in New Jersey, bureaucratic and administrative issues with Rutgers, and the marketing and culture of New Jersey. So, coaching a football team is so much more than just the X's and O's. It's also all of those things and navigating the cultural context where you're operating. And he's done an excellent job, uniquely suited to be the coach of Rutgers. And it's really been, without him, I don't think Rutgers is in the Big Ten. Without him, I don't think Rutgers has made the strides and recognizability that it has. Without him, I think we're in a much different place. So I think he's done a good job. And I also tell you, Steve, I think he's doing a good job of stewarding us into the future because of his ability to kind of be a brand manager, this NIL era and this, pay players era, managing a roster, managing investors. He seems to be uniquely adept at doing that. So we're in good hands from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, generally speaking about Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights, even before they joined the Big Ten, they were always like one of my favorite other teams to root for, aside, of
Mhm.
course, from my Ohio Bobcats. Always heard about them on the East Coast and how they represented the state of New Jersey well.
Yes.
And so, with that, with mentioning the Big Ten and Rutgers, how do you think Rutgers fits into the Big Ten in the overall scope of things?
I think when we initially went in, I think there were some doubters in the Midwest, but I actually think from an institutional standpoint, when you're talking about the size of the universities, the fact that they're state schools, there's a lot of land grant institutions. We eventually did annex the medical school in New Jersey, so we have a medical school. They have medical schools, law schools. They're heavily research, universities. I think from a cultural standpoint, at the university level, we're a very good fit in the Big Ten. And it's been, working in the legal industry and being around people who work in so many various industries in the New York City, New Jersey area. There's so many alumni from all these universities that are Big Ten universities, right? There's a lot of Michigan alumni, a lot of Maryland. Now, Maryland came in with us, obviously, but Penn State. Um, these are schools that are highly respected and that have a lot in common with us. So, brushing elbows with other alumni on a daily basis anyway, and now getting to jab each other over sports moments and things, I think was a good fit. I also think the initial iteration of the Big Ten when we came in, you come in with Maryland, you have Penn State there. Now there's this little trifecta in the mid Atlantic northeast region of the country, and then it's contiguous going west, and you have Michigan, you have Pennsylvania, Ohio, and all of these states going all the way out. Nebraska is obviously a little south, and you go all the way out to Minnesota. I think it made a lot of sense, and we all had that tough, hard nosed running type offenses with these tough defenses, and you're playing at all elements, right? The North and the Midwest, you're playing from hot summer humidity in August all the way to freezing cold in late November. I think there was a good cultural fit there. I think now with the West Coast teams, it's a little bit different, a little more interesting. I think the universities that came in from the West certainly fit in the first aspect I was talking about, academically, institutionally, but culturally, as far as region, I think it's a little different. And I think from an athletic standpoint, I would say Rutgers is in the middle of the pack when you're talking about major sports. Since we've come in, we've struggled in football at times. We've also had some respectable seasons. There are certain teams we haven't beaten, obviously Ohio State, Penn State, but there are teams we've gone back and forth with, Maryland, um, Michigan State, and we've beaten obviously Michigan on a great memorable night, and we've been formidable. I think formidable enough in most situations. Nowhere near the top, nowhere necessarily close to competing with the top. And then in basketball, I think we've really given teams a run for their money. In baseball, in lacrosse, things like that. I think Rutgers is in the middle of the pack here athletically, maybe a bit towards the bottom of the middle of the pack, but trending higher. And Rutgers has to do a good job with not just its football program, but with its basketball program and its other non-revenue sports to be more perennially competitive with these Big Ten powers because they're not quite there yet. Don't have hockey at the varsity level. It's just club. So they've got a ways to go in some aspects, but I do think Rutgers is an institutional and cultural fit, and I think athletically we're going to need some time, but we will get there where we are formidable in every sport and on a consistent basis.
And staying on the topic of sports, college football in particular, um, this is more like a broad question. What are your thoughts on college football today, where it's going with conference realignments and what's going on with Big Ten, SEC, all these power conferences and the college football playoff, transfer portal, NIL, all of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think as much as I love being in the Big Ten, and I do think that's a natural fit for Rutgers, I think that there's a regional aspect of college football that goes back a century or more that we're losing now in some ways. The West Virginia Pittsburgh battle was an annual thing that was important to those two schools for regional reasons, right? Rutgers playing, a Va Tech or a UVA or a Boston College or a Syracuse or a UConn year in and year out with close regional proximity was, I think, important to the region and made for a fun environment because everything was, you could get to every opponent almost by car. And there was a little bit more parity per conference, I'd say. Not that Rutgers did excessively well in the Big East in its early going, but towards the end they did better because I think regionally, for whatever reason, it's stacked up a little better. And so I think you're losing a lot of that now as we do conference realignment. And I'd love to see a future if we're headed in the direction of just massive expansion where maybe there's umbrella conferences, but there's subsections, that go back to some regional contiguous, structure because it's a shame that you lose that. And then feeding into that same conversation, I think college football, what made it unique as opposed to pro sports and what made it special to me was you were rooting for people on the field in football and on the basketball court and everywhere else who were attending the university that you attended, or at least attending a university that was in your state that you cared about because these were the people of your state. This was the university educating the people of your state, whatever it was. And they were not just athletes on the field who were not connected to you. They were your future alumni brothers and sisters, right? They were your future fellow graduates, your future colleagues in the workplace and in society. And so there was more of a family aspect with rooting for college sports that I think now when you look at the transfer portal and NIL, and especially in basketball, you see guys come in for really just the season, which is only maybe a full semester of school if they're really going to class, and maybe a semester and a half. And instead of getting these people that are primarily student athletes attending the university and doing 4 years, 3 years, matriculating to a degree, we have a lot of mercenaries and people that are quasi professional. I think when you combine that with the conference realignment and kind of getting rid of a lot of tradition, you're taking away a really intangible, integral aspect of what college sports is and what makes it great. And when it comes to NIL, I will say that from a objectively honest intellectual standpoint, it just seems as though any individual should be able to profit off of their own name and image and likeness. Meaning, if you're famous at Ohio State for playing ball or Alabama and you want to go sign autographs and get paid for it, there should be nothing stopping you from doing that because it's just your own notoriety. It's your own, people want your signature. You should be able to sell it, right? However, what it's morphed into now, which is not that. It's not, well, the people that are most notable get to profit off their own name, image, and likeness. Now it's just, hey, we're going to call it name, image, and likeness, but we're just going to pay you to play. And we're going to pay you exuberant fees that maybe you're not, the market isn't even dictating. We just have money to blow. And then you get schools from smaller conferences who they could build over 4 years into a competitive team and take down the big boys sometimes. And, you lose all that. And the final thing that you asked me that I will talk about, and it kind of references that, is I think some of the fans are so easily led on this carrot on the stick thing where they'll just follow anything that the media or TV dictates. What I mean by that is the expansion of the college playoff and the expansion of, say, TV deals. Right now, every streaming service wants to get a piece, right? They have to exclusively have this game, and this streaming service exclusively gets this league. And now you're paying more for all these streaming services than you paid for a basic cable package that I thought everybody was so excited we could get away from. And what's happening is everybody just thinks a college playoff is great because there's a college playoff. So therefore, wow, it's wonderful because they're expanding the college playoff. So now maybe 1 year we have a better chance of getting into it. But you know what that does, Steve? That diminishes the mid-tier bowl games because now it's, well, who cares if we go to this bowl game because it's not the college playoff? But guess what else? If you go to the Rose Bowl, but the Rose Bowl is, just one step in a 4-game or 3-game playoff, say you win the Rose Bowl. Back in the day, if you had a great season as a program that wasn't always successful, you had a great season and you capped it off with a Rose Bowl trophy. That was a memorable season. Everybody goes home a winner. But now, if you have a great season and you're not one of the perennial contenders and you win the Rose Bowl, but it's only the first round, then you lose the second round, your season ends in a loss and the Rose Bowl doesn't feel good anymore. And the reason I bring that up is to say this: in the FCS, when teams go into the playoff and they win their championship, or in a men's league at some suburb in some state, if they win the championship, do you think that those people sit there and say, oh, I won the championship, but I really don't care because it's not the national college champion? No, they still want to win their championship. They still want to win their league. And that's the reason I say everything is relative. And we've created an atmosphere now where if you're an FBS school, even in a minor conference, if you don't win the national title, you really haven't won anything. And you've taken away everybody's possibility at having a joyous victory. And it is what you make it. There's no FCS school, I don't think, that's sitting there saying, oh, I wish, our championship doesn't mean anything because we're not in the higher, conferences. So bowl games would have been significant if we let them, but we're dictating to people that you can't have those victories. You can't celebrate those other tournaments or those other things because it's not the pinnacle. And now we've expanded access to the pinnacle. So that's really the best thing. And it washes everything else out. I think all these things, Steve, to be honest, are taking a lot of joy out of college sports, and people are going along with it because they have to. They're obsessed with the TV deals, but you're not seeing that money. You're giving that money. So that's my opinion.
No, no, you definitely make great points there, Larry. As far as like winning your own league championship goes, just last year, I was not expecting it because I thought my Ohio Bobcats were going to have like a rebuilding year last year.
Mm-hmm.
But look what happened. They won 11
Yeah.
games, went 11-3, won the MAC championship, and won the Cure Bowl against Jacksonville State.
Yes.
That was like one of the best seasons I could ever hope for as an Ohio Bobcats fan.
Yes.
And I cherish that. I cherish that MAC championship, clearly, no matter what happens going forward. So,
Yes.
so it is something. It does mean something. So I definitely agree with you about that, Larry. You make great points. So a quick follow-up question to that. As far as the college football playoff, how it's structured right now, we're hearing mumblings about, the Big Ten and SEC wanting four automatic bids, automatic qualifying bids each. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have like the group of six, group of whatever number conferences just having one representative. What are your thoughts on that? Should the group of G number level conferences have any access to this, the college football playoff?
I think it's a difficult situation because I think that it goes to what I just said in the sense that I think I'd like, in theory, everybody to have access to the college football playoff and to make it, an auto bid basically if you win your conference, no matter what the conference is, and give everybody a seat at the table. I think the reality of it is kind of what I just said, even is there's just not really a chance, in my opinion. And I know that we've had a little bit of surprise last season with the seeding, but and this is somebody speaking for as a Rutgers fan who, if we got into the college football playoff, I got to be honest, I wouldn't think we'd have a chance at the national title. And some people, that's blasphemy, but I'm not selling hope, Steve. I'm selling reality. And it's like, you know, I think on the one hand, I'd like more access. On the other hand, I think it's futile. You give more access, and what happens to that fan base or that team? They end in a loss again. Their season ends in a loss and maybe a blowout loss. And now, what is the incentive to spend months and hope and joy to get that seat? And that's the end game. Wow, we got a seat at the tournament only to really not have a chance. And it's really not, there's no substance to it because it's not going to amount to an actual national title, most likely, when you can go off and win a bowl game, minor bowl game, which I don't consider it minor, but win a bowl game and have that memory and go off on top. And let me tell you something, Rutgers trophy case at the Hale Center is cool. I mean, it's nice that they have bowl game trophies. No one says, "Oh, that's just a bowl trophy." Like, no, that's not how it goes. People are excited about it, and I can see both sides, right? I think they should have access if I had my way in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world. And I understand why the access would be limited because it's really futile anyway. You might as well give it to teams that have better shot at actually getting the title and let the other teams and other conferences go out and compete for trophies and other bowls, that there's more of a chance that the fan base is going to be more rewarded, the players, etc. And one last thing about that in the NIL, I also can't stand all these. It's okay to opt out if you've played 4 years, 3 years, and you're definitely going to the NFL. But all these guys just opting out of bowl games as a matter of course, that's partly because we've devalued all these bowl games by saying it's not the national title, it's not anything. That's bad for the fans, and that's bad for the sport and bad for camaraderie. That's my opinion. You go 20 years down the road, a guy sat out, but he fizzled out in the NFL. He's going to wish he had that bowl memory and that ring in his jewelry box and that memory of hoisting up the trophy. It wouldn't matter what bowl it was. He'd wish he had a victory to go out on, as opposed to I have to preserve myself because that doesn't mean anything. And that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I do think that eventually there's going to be some sort of breakaway between the most powerful conferences and the G number level conferences. I do think it's inevitable. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know when exactly, but I think like some years down the road it's going to happen. And I'm just hoping from my standpoint that I'm hoping that the G number level conferences, their commissioners are going to realize that, already have, hopefully, and that they will assemble and get something going as far as their own.
Yes.
If they want their own tournament, fine. I'd be okay with like an 8 team tournament just involving the G number level conferences. I'd be totally fine with that.
I would
So yeah,
watch it.
yeah,
I would
yeah,
watch it and enjoy it, even as a Rutgers fan. I would watch that because and people would get excited. That's what people don't. That's what the powers don't understand. If you had a tournament with those teams and those conferences, people would take it seriously and it would get engagement because you just want to see your team win. You don't care if it's slotted here or slotted there. There's a tournament. Your team's in it. You're gonna watch TV. You're gonna buy tickets. It's just what happens. So
right,
yeah, yeah, I agree.
yeah. So. Speaking of scheduling games and this upcoming season, 2025, I want to bring it up because of the teams that we root for. The season opener, August
Mm-hmm.
28th. It's between the Ohio Bobcats. They are visiting Piscataway, New Jersey, to take on your Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Just as like a quick preview, what are your thoughts initially, like right now, about that game?
I'm excited about it. I think Rutgers is coming into the season with a lot of questions, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think offensively, we have the quarterback situation pretty well figured out with Ethan Kaliakmanis, the one-time Minnesota transfer, good, talented wide receivers who have come into their own, who are young and firing on all cylinders. Some questions on the offensive line. Obviously, Kyle Monangai, one of the leading rushers in the Big Ten, goes to the NFL, got drafted by the Bears, so he's not there anymore. And on defense, we lose Joe Harasimiak, a really good defensive coordinator. And now we go back to Rob Smith, who had a mixed record at Rutgers, better as a special teams coach, not so great his stint as defensive coordinator. And Ohio is coming in as a formidable team that had a really good season last year, who I believe last time we played had a close game at Rutgers. It might have been 26-38 or something at final. Um, I like those games where you've got a team that can get one on you. They can win. Ohio can win, and especially early in the season when these teams go up against each other, you don't know who is who, and you don't know what is what, and teams are rusty and teams are fired up, and you see upsets. So I think it's going to be a test for Rutgers at home. I love home. Home openers are always fun anyway. It's going to be hot. It's always hot at that time, but um, I'm excited for it because I'm excited to see Rutgers get the season going. I'm excited to see what they have in store, what their defense is going to look like, what their offense is going to look like. And I'm excited because it's a legitimate test. It's a team coming in fired up who wants to get one on the road and wants to punch Rutgers in the face and say, hey, wake up. We're here. We're not playing, coming off a good season. So I like the test. I like the fact that Rutgers can't sleepwalk into the first game of the season. And I think it's going to be a good time as it always is. And as I said, any Ohio fans visiting Piscataway, come out and tailgate. It's a great scene. It's a great time. And early in those season, games especially, it's usually a real good time.
Yeah, so there has been like some sort of overlap lately with talent between Ohio and Rutgers. Bradley Weaver,
Hmm.
defensive lineman from Ohio previously, he transferred to Rutgers.
Yes.
That's a good get on your guys' part. You're
Yes.
getting a good player there on defense.
That's
So
great to know.
yeah, and in return, Ohio, we're getting back Shedrick Rhodes just recently. That was announced. We're
Yes.
getting back Shedrick Rhodes, offensive lineman. That's going to help our offensive line. I feel much better about our offensive line now.
Hmm.
Previously, I had a lot of questions about it, but right now I feel much better because of Rhodes and Andre Stewark, really big guy, 6'7", 340 pounds
Wow.
from Appalachian State. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, we're good to go on offensive line now. So I'm happy about that. My only question about my team would be the defensive front seven because we did lose quite a bit of players there in the
Hmm.
transfer portal. But we'll see because I have to remember about that game last year, the season opener last year between Ohio and Syracuse. And I'm hoping it's going to have that kind of similar feeling.
Yes.
So that's my question about Rutgers is like on paper, they have most of the advantages, and I'm just wondering if are they going to be wide awake or are they just going to be sleepwalking, like you said. So
We will see. It
yeah,
happens. Yeah. And
so
Rutgers has started a few of these early season games slower than they'd like. So they get caught a little bit sometimes and have to wake up and they find themselves sometimes in the first half in dogfights in those games. So you never know. And it's nice to see Rhodes landed back there. I know he came, we had some expectations. I guess it didn't work out for whatever reason, but I'm glad he went back where he's comfortable and where he's going to make a difference. So that's great. And
so
we needed defensive help. So I'm glad we got that. And I'm
yeah.
glad the Aries good.
So one last question because we got to get out of here. We only have 2 minutes left. Real quick, any advice that you may have for anybody starting their own YouTube channel or podcast for college sports?
I would say just get out and start talking. Make sure you have good equipment in terms of microphones and lighting, and because that makes all the difference. People perceive what they are used to, right? And so if they hear you and you sound crisp and you sound good, and they're just going to take you seriously from the very beginning just by what they hear and see. So go at it with the right equipment. Make sure you do your research and you know what you're going to talk about. And then my best advice is just be consistent. Start putting out content. Keep putting out content. And both times I've started a podcast with the Dolphins and then with Rutgers for sports, all of a sudden somebody helps me out. Somebody finds me because you never know who's watching. You might have 5 viewers every video and think, this is not worth it. I'm only getting 5 viewers. One of those viewers may be a big YouTube creator who's constantly on there looking for new content. He might see you and say, hey, come do a show with me. Next thing you know, you're collaborating with a big creator and you get a ton of subscribers. That happened to me both times, and now I'm kind of I'm not high up on either sport, but I have a respectable enough following that it's worth it for me to do. So keep plugging away, be confident in yourself, make sure you brand yourself with a good name, and make sure you invest in good equipment for yourself. You're worth that. But keep chugging away and don't get deterred, and eventually you'll break through.
And we'll wrap it up with that. Thank you so much, Larry Crane, for this interview. I really appreciate it. Got to know more about Rutgers Scarlet Knights sports. Thank you so much, Larry, for being on my show. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me. Absolute pleasure.
And with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll see each other again. Take care,
See you later,
guys.
Steve.